My name's Jason Whitaker, 33, and I designed steel beams strong enough to hold up skyscrapers. But no steel could hold me together the day my grandmother's will was read. Her mahogany dining room smelled like lemon polish and old judgment. My brothers sat beside the lawyer, grinning like wolves who had already tasted the kill. When Claire read the final line, "To my grandson, Jason Whitaker, nothing E.G." The room went silent, except for the scrape of Mark's cufflinks. I smiled like it didn't matter. It did. It broke something deep. After everyone toasted their new fortune, I drove back to her empty mansion to collect the last of my tools. The house felt alive, breathing with dust and secrets. Then I heard a metallic click coming from the basement door. When I pulled the chain light, the floor revealed a safe buried in concrete, the words carved on its lid, "For the one left out." And right then, I realized Grandma hadn't erased me. She'd chosen me. Everyone got richer that morning except me. The mahogany table gleamed beneath the heavy lights of Whitaker and Lutz Law. My brothers sat across from me, dressed like Wall Street bankers at a celebration, not a funeral. Mark, the eldest, leaned back in his chair, legs crossed, confidence dripping from every movement. Ryan sat beside him, nervously fidgeting with a pen, pretending he didn't already know the outcome. The lawyer, Claire Lutz, cleared her throat and began reading Grandma's will. Her voice was steady, almost rehearsed. "To my beloved grandson, Mark Whitaker, the ownership of Whitaker Real Estate Holdings." Mark's lips twitched into a satisfied grin. "To my grandson, Ryan Whitaker, the vacation estate in Savannah and the family trust fund." Ryan nodded, face flushed with victory. Then came the silence. Claire flipped to the final page. "To my grandson, Jason Whitaker." She hesitated. Nothing. A few people gasped. The air in the room went thin. Mark chuckled under his breath. "Guess Grandma finally saw through you, little brother." I didn't respond. My throat was dry, my chest hollow. I just stared at the lawyer, waiting for her to say she'd made a mistake, that there was another clause, a line, a note, something. But there wasn't. The others began murmuring. Didn't he help her with the renovations? Wasn't he the one who visited her every week? Their pity felt worse than their laughter. Claire kept her eyes down, voice quieter now. "Mrs. Eleanor Whitaker's will is final." I forced myself to stand. "Thank you for your time." My voice sounded calm, but my hands were trembling behind my back. As I turned toward the door, Mark leaned in. "You were always Grandma's charity case, Jason. Guess charity's over." Ryan tried to soften it. "Don't take it personally, man." She was old, probably confused. I smiled, the kind of smile that hides 1,000 cracks. Yeah, confused. Outside, the sunlight hit me like a spotlight. Everyone walked to their expensive cars. Mark's Mercedes purred as he revved the engine, calling out, "Hey, little brother. Maybe next life, huh?" I didn't answer. I just kept walking to my rusted Chevy, the one Grandma helped me buy 10 years ago. The same woman who now leaves me nothing. When I gripped the steering wheel, my fingers brushed something in my palm, a folded piece of paper. I hadn't even realized Claire slipped it to me when we shook hands. I opened it. The handwriting was small, rushed. "Come back tonight." Some things aren't public. My heart kicked hard. I looked up at the mansion on the hill, Grandma's house. Every window dark, every brick soaked in secrets. That night I drove back. The sky hung low with rain. The house stood silent, watching me like it knew I'd return. I stepped onto the porch. The front door creaked open on its own. And somewhere deep inside that old house, a metal lock clicked open like it had been waiting for me. The house smelled like rain and regret. I stood in the doorway, half expecting to hear Grandma's voice calling from the kitchen like she always did. Instead, I heard only the steady drip of water from the cracked ceiling and the faint tick of a clock somewhere deep inside the walls. Everything looked frozen in time. The velvet curtains still hung heavy over the tall windows. The dining table still set for a meal no one would ever eat. Dust covered everything except one thing. The chair she always sat in. Someone had wiped it clean recently. I walked down the hallway, my boots echoing against the oak floorboards. Each step groaned, as if the house itself didn't want me there. I tried to laugh it off, but the air felt alive, thick with something that wasn't grief. It was memory. On the wall, her family portrait stared at me. The same faces I saw every Christmas, now gray and cold behind glass. Grandma's portrait hung in the center, her smile faint, eyes sharper than I remembered. The light from the storm outside flickered across her face, and for a moment it looked like she was watching me move. I pushed open the study door. Papers were scattered across the desk, drawers half open, as if someone had been searching for something. I ran my fingers across the oak, tracing the edges of a frame sitting face down. When I turned it over, I saw an old photo of the estate taken long before I was born. There was the house, the garden, and the same rose bushes that lined the back fence. But in the corner of the photograph, barely visible, a small wooden door under the porch. A basement entrance I'd never seen before. Next to the photo was a rolled-up set of blueprints tied with a faded ribbon. I untied it, and across the top, written in thick pencil, were the words, "Property Tunnel Layout, 1953. The paper was yellowed, edges frayed. Lines crisscrossed beneath the house leading to something marked Vault Chamber. I traced the route with my thumb. The tunnel started from the basement and ended under the rose garden, the same spot Grandma used to say, "Never dig near." A chill ran through me. The ticking clock grew louder, faster, as if echoing my heartbeat. I turned toward the hallway again. The portraits seemed to lean forward now, their eyes darker in the flickering light. I told myself I was imagining it, but I could feel something in the air shift, like the house exhaled after holding its breath for too long. I walked to the basement door, the one tucked behind the kitchen stairs. It was painted shut like no one had touched it in decades. I placed my hand on the handle. Cold metal. Still. Then, just as thunder rolled across the sky, I heard it. A faint click from beneath the floorboards. The lock had turned, by itself. No one leaves safes for ghosts. That was the first thing that came to mind when I saw the old safe half buried in concrete beneath the basement stairs. Its metal was dark with age, corners rusted, the dial frozen at 0. Dust covered everything down there except the lid. Someone had wiped it clean. A single strip of yellowed masking tape stretched across the front. The handwriting on it stopped my breath cold. For the one left out. My pulse kicked hard in my chest. It was Grandma's handwriting. I'd know those looping letters anywhere. I crouched, tracing the tape with my thumb. The words looked like they were written in a hurry, like she knew time was running out. I tried to twist the dial, but it didn't move. The lock was jammed tight. I looked around the basement for tools, anything that could help. The room was lined with old trunks, jars of paint thinner, and shelves sagging under the weight of forgotten things. Photo albums, boxes labeled Eleanor 1974, and a broken lamp that still smelled faintly of gasoline. I pried open one of the boxes. Inside were dozens of letters tied with a ribbon, their paper soft and brown with age. Most were addressed to Eleanor Whitaker, postmarked from places she'd never told us she'd been. London, Berlin, Kansas City. One envelope had no stamp, no address, just my name written faintly across it. But when I tried to open it, the flap tore, revealing only half a message, scrawled in that same trembling hand, "Truth waits where roots can't grow." I read it over and over. The words didn't make sense, not yet. Then it hit me, Grandma's rose garden, the one she'd tended every morning, even when her hands shook too badly to hold a cup. She used to say, "Those roses feed on secrets, Jason." I thought it was one of her weird metaphors. Maybe it wasn't. I stood there, staring at the ceiling above, imagining the rows of rose bushes sitting quietly over whatever this message meant. The tunnel on the old blueprint led right to that garden. The air in the basement grew colder, heavy with that same ticking sound from upstairs. Only now it felt closer, deeper, like the sound was coming from beneath the concrete. I took a step back from the safe. For the first time in years, I felt something I couldn't explain. Ear wrapped in curiosity. Whatever Grandma hid down here wasn't meant to stay buried forever. As I turned toward the stairs, a sudden noise made me freeze. 3 sharp knocks, not from below this time, but from the front door above. I climbed the steps, each one groaning like the house was warning me. When I reached the hallway, I saw a shadow through the glass. A tall figure, rain dripping from his coat. When I opened the door, the man smiled faintly under his gray beard. "Evening," he said. "Name's Peter Holt. I used to take care of this place." The retired groundskeeper, and the way he looked past me into the house made my stomach twist, like he already knew what I'd found. He looked like someone who'd buried too many truths. Peter Holt stood on the porch, rain dripping off his cap, eyes hidden beneath the brim. His coat was soaked through, but he didn't seem to care. He glanced past me, into the hallway as if he were counting ghosts. "I heard you came back," he said finally, voice low and gravelly. "Didn't take you for the kind that'd return after a will like that." I stepped aside, hesitant. "You worked for my grandmother, right?" He nodded once. 40 years. Knew this land before you were born. Every inch of it. Something about the way he said it made me uneasy. He didn't sound proud. He sounded haunted. He looked around the living room, his boots leaving wet marks on the old floorboards. "This house ain't what it used to be," he murmured. "Some things inside don't rest easy." I folded my arms. "You mean the safe in the basement?" His head snapped up. The flicker in his eyes said everything. "You found it?" He wasn't asking. "Yeah," I said. "There's a note on it. Says, for the one left out." "You know what that means?" Peter's jaw tightened. He rubbed the back of his neck, the lines in his hands deep as scars. "She told me you'd find it one day," he said. "Told me to warn you not to dig under the roses." My heart skipped. The roses? Why? He took a long breath like he was choosing words carefully. "Because that's where the roots die. She said the ground down there remembers more than people should." I frowned. "That doesn't mean anything." He leaned closer. "It does if you've seen what I've seen." His tone had changed lower, trembling, as if the walls were listening. I could see the fear in his eyes now, the kind that comes from living too close to secrets. "Peter," I said quietly, "what happened here?" He didn't answer. Instead, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small envelope, edges wrinkled from age. "She left you what money couldn't buy," he said. "Don't go chasing what's already chosen you." Before I could speak, he put the envelope on the table and turned toward the door. "Wait," I called. "Why tell me this now?" He stopped at the threshold. "Because you're not the first to look." Something cold slipped down my spine. "Who else?" Peter hesitated, then muttered, "Your brother. The older one, Mark. He came here the night before she died. Asked me where the basement key was." Then he left. Rain roared against the windows, thunder shaking the walls. I tore open the envelope, but it was empty. Completely blank. My hands were still shaking when I walked toward the basement again. The door hung open just an inch, creaking softly like it was breathing. I took one step down, and my boot hit something metallic on the floor. I bent down and picked it up. A gold cufflink engraved with an M. Marks, the same one he wore at the will reading. You don't visit graves wearing a Rolex. That was my first thought when I saw Mark's car parked outside Dad's old office, the one he kept just to impress investors. I killed the engine and watched him through the rain-specked glass. He was inside, laughing with Ryan, a bottle of bourbon half empty on the desk. I took a breath and walked in without knocking. The smell of cigars hit me first, thick and smug. Mark looked up, a smirk already loaded. "Well, well, if it isn't the family charity case." Ryan shifted uncomfortably, eyes darting between us. "Hey, Jace, we were just talking about you." "Yeah?" I said. "Planning another celebration. Maybe toast the part where Grandma left me nothing?" Mark poured himself another drink. "Don't get bitter, little brother. You were always the emotional one." He raised his glass. "To Grandma. For finally using her head." I stepped closer, fists tightening. "She trusted you. And you used her." He laughed. "I used what she gave me. That's called inheritance." I looked at Ryan. "You really going along with this?" Ryan avoided my eyes. "You don't understand, Jason. Grandma. She wasn't herself at the end." "Cut the act," I said. "I found the safe." The words slipped out before I could stop them. Mark's smile froze. Ryan's jaw twitched. Silence dropped like a hammer. Mark leaned back slowly. "Safe?" he repeated, voice calm but sharp. "What's safe?" I shrugged, pretending not to notice the tension crawling up his neck. "The one she left in the basement." Ryan's voice cracked. You opened it. That slip said everything. I turned to him, heartbeat pounding. You knew about it? Ryan looked terrified. Mark slammed his glass down, shattering it. That's enough. He stood, face red, the charming mask gone. You want to play detective? Fine, but you're out, permanently. He pulled out a stack of papers from a drawer and tossed them across the desk. Sign these. I glanced at the legal documents, dense text, my name already printed. What's this? Mark smiled coldly. A waiver. You sign, you give up any claim to Grandma's estate. Every property, every trust, every cent. And if I don't? His voice dropped low. Then maybe that old Chevy of yours doesn't make it home tonight. Ryan stepped between us, voice trembling. Mark, stop. He's still family. Not anymore, Mark snapped. Family doesn't steal from family. I took a slow step back. You're right, I said quietly. They just bury them alive. Mark slammed his hand against the desk. Sign it. I grabbed the pen, pretended to consider it, then dropped it on the papers. You should have known, Mark. Grandma never trusted you. His jaw tightened. Watch your back, little brother. I turned for the door. Ryan called after me. Jason, don't go back there tonight. The house isn't safe. I froze. What did you just say? Ryan's face went pale. I didn't mean, but I was already gone. Outside, rain poured harder, thunder cracking overhead. They knew. They'd known about the safe all along. It had my name, but no return address. I found the envelope by accident while cleaning the guest room, the one Grandma always kept locked when she was alive. A corner of yellowed paper peeked out from behind her dresser mirror. When I pulled the frame away, dust and fragments of glass rained down, and there it was, sealed tight, edges worn. My name written in her familiar, careful script. Jason. No stamp. No date, just my name. My hands trembled as I tore it open. Inside was a single sheet, folded twice and smelling faintly of old perfume and wood smoke. The handwriting was uneven, like she'd written it in a rush. If you're reading this, you found the house before they took it. The truth is locked where memory sleeps. Numbers matter. 190786. That was it. No signature. No clue what the numbers meant. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at them. 190786. Could it be a date? July 19th, 1986? Or maybe the safe's combination. I grabbed my phone, searching family records, photos, anything with those numbers. Nothing. The storm outside grew heavier, rain tapping against the window in quick, uneven bursts like the house itself was whispering. The mirror I'd pulled off the wall reflected just enough light to catch something strange. Tiny flecks of silver etched into the paper's surface. I held it closer, invisible at first glance. Then I remembered Grandma's old habit. She used to hide messages with heat. She'd told me once, ink can lie, Jason, but fire tells the truth. I grabbed a candle from the dresser and held the letter over the flame, careful not to burn it. Slowly, faint lines began to appear in the blank space beneath her handwriting. The hidden message formed one shaky sentence. Ask Claire about the storm. Claire, the lawyer. I sat back, heart hammering. Claire had been avoiding me since the will reading. She'd slipped me that first note, come back tonight. Some things aren't public. Now Grandma's words pointed straight to her again. I ran through memories, trying to piece together what the storm meant. Grandma used to talk about a thunderstorm that destroyed part of the property years ago, the same summer Dad left. I always thought it was just the weather. Maybe it wasn't. Lightning flashed outside, illuminating the room. In the reflection of the mirror, for a split second, I thought I saw a figure in the hallway. I spun around, heart pounding. Nothing, just shadows. I folded the letter carefully and slid it into my jacket pocket. If Grandma's message was right, the answers weren't buried in the house. They were sitting behind a polished desk with a woman who'd been lying to me since the day the will was read. I grabbed my keys. The storm raged harder as I stepped outside, wind pushing against me like the house didn't want to let me go. But I didn't look back. I started the car and drove straight toward the lawyer's office. Claire was going to tell me everything. She was waiting with 2 cups of coffee and one lie. Claire Lutz sat behind her polished oak desk, the office glowing with soft lamplight. The storm outside had turned the windows into black mirrors. She looked tired, like someone who hadn't slept since the will reading. One cup of coffee sat in front of her, the other waiting across from it. "I figured you'd come," she said quietly. "You figured right," I replied, setting Grandma's letter on her desk. "You want to explain what this means?" Her eyes flicked over the paper, then back to me. "She left you that?" "She left it for me," I said. "And she told me to ask you about the storm." Claire froze, fingers tightening around her cup. For a moment, all I heard was the wind howling against the glass. Then she sighed, whispering, "I was afraid of that." "What storm?" I pressed. She leaned back, eyes glistening. "The night Eleanor rewrote her will. It was raining harder than I'd ever seen. She called me at 2 in the morning, said she'd made a mistake and needed to fix it before dawn. She signed a new will that night, naming you as her primary heir." My chest tightened. "Then why didn't I hear about it?" Claire looked down. "Because that copy disappeared the next day. Someone broke into my office before sunrise. Only one file was taken. Mark. It had to be him." She reached into her drawer and pulled out a small flash drive wrapped in tissue paper. "I kept a backup of something else," she said. "A recording." "I wasn't supposed to, but your grandmother asked me to hide it. I didn't even know what was on it until last week." Across the silver casing, written in fading ink, were the words, "Rosewell Bank Deposit 42. "What's this?" I asked. Her voice dropped to a whisper. "Whatever she left in that deposit box, it's the reason your brothers are trying to erase you. She said if anything ever happened to her, the recording would lead to the truth." "Why are you giving it to me now?" Claire's lip trembled. "Because I've seen that look before. The same one Eleanor had when she realized what her family had done." I took the flash drive, feeling its weight. "And what happens if I play it?" She gave a sad smile. "Then you'll hear the part of your grandmother no one else ever knew." Lightning flashed outside and thunder rolled across the street. The lights flickered once, then steadied. I slipped the flash drive into my pocket, my pulse hammering. "Thank you," I said, standing. As I reached the door, her voice stopped me. "Jason, whatever's on that file, don't listen alone." But I was already halfway to the car, rain pounding on the windshield. By the time I plugged the flash drive into my laptop, the room went silent. Then, through the static, a voice whispered, "Jason, if you're hearing this, it means they found the will first. When dead people talk, you listen." The file took a few seconds to load, the screen flickering between static and darkness. Then her voice came through soft, shaky, older than I remembered, but still undeniably Grandma. "Jason, if you're hearing this, it means they found the will first." I froze. My throat tightened as she continued, her words crackling through the static like whispers trapped in dust. "I didn't cut you out because I stopped loving you. I did it because you were the only one who didn't ask for anything. You were the only one who still saw me as family, not a fortune." Her voice trembled. "Your brothers Mark and Ryan, they've done things you wouldn't believe. The land titles, the company accounts, they were falsified. Illegal deeds under Mark's name. I tried to stop it. That's why they turned on me." I stared at the laptop, the sound of rain outside syncing with the static. My heartbeat drowned out everything else. "So I left you what I couldn't give them proof, but to protect you, I made you the outcast. They can't destroy what they don't think you have." The recording broke for a moment, a hiss of interference, then came back weaker. "If they find this before you do, burn it. Promise me, Jason, don't let them use my name again." I leaned closer, jaw tight. "What proof?" I whispered to the screen like she could answer me. She didn't. Instead, there was a faint metallic scrape in the background of the recording, like someone dragging a chair across a concrete floor. Then her breathing slowed. "The key," she said finally, "is beneath the heart." Static swallowed her voice completely after that. I sat there in the glow of the screen, staring at those words looping in my head. beneath the heart. Was it metaphorical or literal? The old blueprints flashed through my mind, the ones labeled Property Tunnel Layout, 1953. There had been a shape drawn near the center of the house, right under the parlor. A circular symbol. I thought it was a foundation marker, but maybe it wasn't. If the heart of the property was where she hid the key, it meant I'd been looking in the wrong place all along. Not in the basement, not in the garden, somewhere in the center. Outside, thunder cracked so loud the lights flickered. I shut the laptop, heart racing. Claire's words echoed in my head. Don't listen alone. Too late for that. I stood, slipping the flash drive into my pocket. The air in the room felt heavy, pulsing, like the walls were holding their breath. Then I heard something. 3 slow knocks from the front door. When I opened it, the porch was empty. Just rain and darkness. And on the welcome mat, a small, heart-shaped key. I dug like a man trying to unbury his name. The rain had stopped. Sometime after midnight, but the ground was still soft, wet, and heavy with the smell of earth and old secrets. The rose garden was a graveyard now. Brown stems, dying petals, and roots that curled like veins beneath the soil. Grandma had called it her sanctuary. Turns out it was a hiding place. I shoved the shovel into the dirt again, each hit dull and hollow. My clothes were soaked, my hands blistered, but I couldn't stop. Her voice from the recording kept looping in my head. The key is beneath the heart. The roses formed a perfect circle around an iron heart embedded in the garden's stone base, something I'd always thought was decoration. But when I brushed away the mud, I saw faint etchings beneath it. 1953, Holloway Foundry. I wedged the shovel under the iron heart and pried it loose. The sound it made was a deep metallic groan, felt like the ground itself exhaling. Underneath was a small latch, and when I pulled it, the soil shifted, revealing a rusted metal box about the size of a lunch tin. Heart-shaped. My breath caught. I wiped away the grime and saw her initials engraved faintly across the top. E.H. My hands shook as I cracked it open. Inside lay a small brass key, dulled by time, and a folded bank slip yellowed with age. The paper nearly tore in my fingers, but the text was still clear. Rosewell Bank Deposit Transfer Date, July 19, 1986. Amount, $8,600,000. Recipient, J. W. Trust J. W. Jason Whitaker. My name. My throat tightened. Grandma had created a trust in my name almost 40 years ago, before I was even born. It didn't make sense. Unless she'd planned for everything. Unless she'd known her family. Would destroy itself and wanted me to find what was left of her truth. The brass key gleamed under the flashlight, its teeth shaped like a rose stem. I turned it in my hand, wondering if it matched the safe downstairs or something bigger. Then a light swept across the garden. Headlights. I froze, crouching low. The sound of gravel crunching under heavy tires filled the silence. "Jason!" Mark's voice. My heart dropped. I stuffed the papers into my jacket, kicked dirt over the open hole, and turned just as Mark stepped out of his truck, flashlight cutting through the darkness. His suit was wrinkled, his eyes bloodshot, but his grin was razor-sharp. "Well," he said slowly, shining the beam on my hands, still smeared with mud. "Looks like the black sheep finally started digging." "Go home, Mark," I said, trying to sound steady. He took a step closer, the light moving from my face to the box at my feet. "What's that?" "Nothing you'd understand." He chuckled, low and dark. "Oh, I think I understand perfectly. You found it." Rain started again, soft, steady. Mark reached into his coat. "Hand it over, Jason." And for the first time, I saw what he was holding. A gun. Brothers don't bring gasoline unless they plan to end something. Mark's truck engine was still ticking when I made it to the basement door. My pulse was a drumbeat in my ears, my fingers tight around the brass key. The moment I flicked on the light, I saw the gas can half empty resting beside the stairs. The smell hit first, sharp, bitter, unmistakable. "Mark!" I shouted. My voice bounced off the concrete walls. He stepped out from behind the furnace, flashlight in one hand, pistol in the other. His face glistened with sweat. "You couldn't leave it alone, could you?" I backed away, the brass key cold in my palm. "This isn't about money anymore." He smirked. "It's always about money. Grandma played us all, me, Ryan, and even you. You think she made you special? You were her distraction." "She trusted me," I said quietly. "She trusted no one," he roared, kicking over a box. Papers were scattered across the floor. "You think she built that fortune clean? You have no idea what she hid in here." The smell of gasoline thickened. A trail of it snaked from the stairs to the furnace. My eyes darted to the corner of the heart-shaped safe, half buried under tarp and dust. Mark followed my gaze. "That's what you came for, right? You want the truth? Open it. Let's see if it's worth dying for." I slid the brass key into the lock. It fit perfectly. The mechanism clicked, a slow metallic turn that echoed like a heartbeat. Inside was another envelope, sealed in wax. I barely had time to grab it before Mark lunged. We hit the floor hard. The gun skidded across the concrete. I shoved him off and scrambled to my feet, but he caught my leg and yanked me down again. "Give it to me," he shouted, eyes wild. The lantern beside us toppled, spilling oil. The fumes caught the gas trail like a fuse. A roar exploded through the basement, fire crawling across the floor, fast, alive. "Mark, stop!" I yelled. "It's burning." He froze, staring at the flames spreading toward the stairs. The air filled with smoke, heat rolling up the walls. Then Ryan's voice cut through the chaos. "Jason, Mark, get out." He stumbled down the steps, coughing, and a wet cloth was pressed over his mouth. "What the hell did you do?" "Ryan, grab the safe," I shouted. He hesitated only a second before rushing forward, pulling at the heavy box with both hands. The fire was already licking the lower steps. Mark tried to grab him, but Ryan pushed him back. "Enough, Mark, it's over. Don't touch that safe," Mark shouted, lunging again. The flames caught his sleeve. He screamed, slapping at the fire, eyes wide with panic. I grabbed his arm and yanked him toward the stairs, but he fought me off. "Save your damn safe," he spat, stumbling into the smoke. I turned to Ryan. He was coughing, face pale, hands blistered as he shoved the safe toward me. "Go!" he gasped. I grabbed the handle and pulled with everything I had, dragging it across the floor, sparks bursting around us. The heat was unbearable. When I reached the doorway, I looked back, Ryan still inside, Mark lost in the flames. "Ryan!" He shoved me upward, his voice breaking. "Get it out, Jason." I stumbled into the yard just as the windows blew out behind me, a wave of heat knocking me to the ground. The safe landed beside me in the wet grass, glowing faintly through the ash. Behind me, the house burned like it was remembering everything at once. The lock gave way with a sigh like Grandma finally exhaled. The metal groaned as I turned the brass key one last time. The latch clicked and the safe door creaked open, spilling a faint puff of smoke and the smell of scorched paper. My hands were shaking, half from adrenaline, half from exhaustion. Behind me, the house still hissed and cracked, flames eating away at what was once our family's monument to pride and lies. Inside the safe was a stack of sealed envelopes, perfectly dry despite the chaos. The top one bore her handwriting, elegant, deliberate, unmistakable. Eleanor Whitaker, my grandmother. I tore it open carefully. Inside were confession letters, signed statements, notarized documents, and legal contracts that made my stomach twist. Every page was a map of betrayal. Fake land transfers. Forged deeds. Mark's signature on wire fraud receipts linking him to shell accounts in the Caymans. Ryan's name is listed as a silent beneficiary. And at the bottom, the lawyer's original draft of the real will was dated the same night Grandma had called Claire during the storm. It was all there. Her voice echoed in my head from the recording. "I didn't cut you out because I stopped loving you. I did it because you were the only one who didn't ask." I flipped to the last page. Taped there, slightly crooked, was another sheet handwritten in blue ink, faded at the edges. To my grandson, Jason Whitaker. If you're reading this, then the fire I feared has already begun. The money was never the inheritance, truth was. You will find more value in rebuilding what they burned than taking what they hoarded. Justice isn't given, it's built. My throat tightened. For a moment, the noise around me disappeared. The fire, the rain, even the sirens that began to wail in the distance, all of it faded beneath the weight of those words. I looked down at the final envelope buried beneath the papers. It was sealed with wax and stamped "Secondary Will." The first line inside was simple. I, Eleanor Whitaker, hereby name my grandson, Jason Whitaker, as my sole rightful heir. My vision blurred. Every humiliation from that will reading flashed back in my mind. The laughter, the whispers, the looks of pity. And now, in my hands, the truth that erased all of it. I stuffed the papers into a waterproof bag from the tool chest and zipped it shut. The flames behind me cracked louder, devouring the last of the roof. Then footsteps. I spun around, half expecting to see Mark stumbling through the smoke, maybe ready for another fight. But no one was there, just footprints in the mud. The sirens grew closer, red and blue lights bleeding through the trees. I stared at the prints they led away from the burning house. Mark was gone. I clutched the bag tighter, watching the mansion crumble in on itself. The rain began again, soft and steady, washing soot from my hands. Grandma was right. The money wasn't the inheritance. The truth was. The mansion was gone, but her truth still stood. By morning, nothing remained but a blackened skeleton of beams and smoke curling into the gray sky. I watched from the back of an ambulance, a blanket over my shoulders, the waterproof bag resting on my lap. Inside it lay what money couldn't buy: proof, confession, and the kind of truth that doesn't burn. Detectives combed through the ashes while officers taped off the property. One of them handed me a clipboard. "You're sure your brother started the fire?" I looked at the wet ground where Mark's tire tracks vanished down the hill. He didn't come here to talk. By the afternoon, they found him 2 counties over, trying to withdraw funds using one of the forged deeds I'd pulled from the safe. The arrest made the news before sunset. Whitaker family scandal. Exposes decades of fraud. Ryan survived, barely. His hands were wrapped in bandages when I visited him in the hospital. He couldn't meet my eyes at first. "I didn't know how deep it went," he said quietly. "I just signed what Mark told me to. I was scared to lose everything." "You didn't lose everything," I told him. "You just forgot what mattered." He nodded, tears welling up. "I'm sorry, Jason, for all of it." For the first time in years, I believed him. When the court finalized the inheritance months later, I stood alone in the same lawyer's office where it had all begun. The official Grandma's real will named me sole heir to the Whitaker estate. $8.6 million, plus properties, bonds, and shares I didn't even understand. I signed the papers quietly, then slid half the assets into a new account, one that would rebuild the local orphanages my grandmother once funded before her fortune turned corrupt. It felt right. She hadn't left me money to spend. She'd left me a promise to keep. I drove back to the ruins one last time that night. The air smelled of wet ash and roses. Beneath the burned soil, new shoots had already begun to push through. Nature doesn't wait for forgiveness. It just grows again. I stood there until the sky turned pale with dawn, holding the brass key that started it all. It was bent, blackened, useless now. Still, I couldn't let it go. Some inheritances come in paper and gold. Mine came in fire and truth. I looked at the horizon, the ashes glowing faintly in the morning light, and whispered to the wind, "Grandma didn't leave me anything. She left me the truth." Then I turned to the camera, voice steady, calm, final. If this story hit your heart, subscribe. The next one might hit closer to home.